Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today for today's webinar. Just been looking down the chat to see where everyone's joining from. It's great to see so many of you here today. So this is the last of our in our series of webinars that we've been running with RS Components. RS has been a massive supporter of CIPS for many years, so a big thank you for them for supporting us on this webinar. Don't worry, because we've recorded all 3 sessions, so if you missed out on the other 2, we'll be sharing the links to those, and also we're recording today's. So if you don't get a chance to tune in for the whole session, or you want to share it with your colleagues afterwards or watch again, then that will be made available to you, and we'll email that out next week. Okay, so today's topic, we're going to be talking about the importance of supplier relationship management. We want to make this session as interactive as possible, so it's great to see you all joining in on the chat. Continue that throughout the session, so add some comments, let us know, have that discussion going on. Connect with some people here, so don't forget to go away and find people on LinkedIn afterwards perhaps, and stay connected. So try and keep that networking going. And also we want your questions as well for our panel, so you can add those. If you could put them in the Q&A box just at the middle down at the bottom here, that'll help us find those. So some people pop them in the chat and they often get missed. I'll try and get through as many as possible, so please get them in as early as you can to stand the best chance of getting your questions through to our panel. So I'm going to start off today's session where we're going to be joined by Thomas Large from RS Components. So Tom, please join us.
Hi, Emma.
Hi, thanks, Tom. Thanks for joining us today. Great RS supporting us once again on this webinar. So tell me a little bit about you and your role at RS, Tom.
Yeah, no worries. So first of all, good afternoon to everybody. Hope everyone's well. So yeah, my name's Tom Large. I've been at RS for about 8 years now. I'm a senior category manager within RS, looking after the PPE and site safety, including hygiene areas. So as you can imagine, the last 2 years have been quite a lot of fun. So within that space, I sort of manage the strategy for those areas globally, internationally supporting the local markets as well. So working very closely with our regional teams across the globe. In terms of for today's call, obviously around supplier relationship management, I manage 20 global suppliers. So suppliers as we classify that are important to our global strategy across the board. The largest of these being around a £20 million supplier. So I'm sure everyone's heard of 3M. So I look after 3M for RS and manage the relationship on behalf of the Electro Components Group. So I have commercial responsibility for these suppliers. So that's negotiating contracts, cost pricing, everything that comes with that sort of stuff. I also manage the product life cycle for products associated to these suppliers. So, you know, right across the board from introduction to discontinuation. And lately, I've also been working very closely with Liscombe's and Needler's, who recently became part of the Electro Components Group. Both of these being PPE specialists. So a core strategy of what we want to do is really enhance our PPE offering. Hence the acquisitions of Needler's and Liscombe coming into place. So yeah, it's been a lot going on with that space. So
absolutely. I mean, it's such a remarkable category to manage as well. It's just gone through so much change over the last few years. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, someone describing accessing PPE a bit like being out in the Wild West. So hopefully things have settled down a little bit more now.
Yeah. I mean, it's been absolutely crazy for me personally. So I started looking after the PPE area in sort of middle of 2019. So I came into it just before the pandemic started to hit. And I mean, it was a core principle of our strategy back then anyway, to really grow it. So there was a lot of focus on it then anyway. But yeah, I've probably had, 10 years learning in the short time I've been looking after it. So it's been an experience, but a good one.
Excellent stuff. I was going to ask you about how the role of supplier partnership has changed over the last year or two, and do you think that will continue to evolve?
Yeah, definitely. I think, from an RS point of view, we sort of build partnerships with our supplier partners rather than, the traditional vendor buyer sort of thing that you might see elsewhere. But it's definitely changed over the past year. The pandemic's increased the need for that. I think one of the things that definitely has happened is that we've become a lot closer to the supplier than we probably were before. I think that's really important now. I think within that as well, building relationships outside of the traditional just key account manager relationship you might have with the supplier has been really key. I know from my own personal experience, managing someone like a 3M, for example, we've built relationships with their marketing teams, with their pricing teams, with their local product managers, with the stock guys, with the inventory teams. So, it's enabled us to be a lot more proactive in terms of our management of 3M products rather than what might have been traditional reactive relationships in the past, I guess. So that's been really important for us. I think, the changing world of costs and raw material shortages and stock shortages, which I'm sure we'll touch on a lot today, has also heightened that need to have much closer relationships with the supplier. And obviously the obvious one as well, a lot of these relationships are digital now and they're remote. We're often talking to people and conversing with people that we've never met face to face. And I'm sure we'll touch on the trust element today, but, having that trusting relationship and building that up can be a lot more difficult to do virtually than it can be to do face to face. So, that's really changed how we work. I think from my own personal point of view as well, I probably talk to suppliers a lot more than I did before. Not just about the traditional things about stock and pricing and all this sort of stuff, but really trying to get a real wider view of what's going on in the marketplace. What are they seeing? What are the trends? What are the macroeconomic trends they're seeing? And it's been vital to try and get that information out of them through COVID, but also what's going on now as well with obviously with the situation with Ukraine and Russia, even more important. So it has, and Brexit as well, is a background of that. That's obviously just been some working through that has been a big issue for us. So, yeah, I think over the past year, definitely we've become a lot closer to them. You've had to manage the virtual piece, but for me as well, I think the key thing that will change and will continue to change is trying to build relationships outside of the traditional key account manager ones. That's where we've found some real success.
Yeah, that was interesting. You've probably got 3 or 4 times the number of touch points with some critical suppliers that you would have traditionally had. Yeah,
exactly. I think because one of the things that we really try to do is you want to get to the decision makers, the people that can actually help you or influence your business. More often than not, a lot of key account managers you speak to, they're not actually people who can make those decisions. So it's about getting to the next stage. And some of that as well is building those senior level relationships. We've had a lot of calls over the past year, a lot of meetings over the past year with, CEOs, COOs, and connecting those dots as well within the electro components group has been really important. Not only so that these sort of people can understand the strategy and where we're moving towards, but obviously they're the people that can say yes or no to a lot of the things that, will help us. It's been really important to build those as well.
Absolutely, I can see that. It's like getting those relationships with the right people. You get the information much quicker as well. There's less barriers in the way. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And why is supplier relationship management still a challenge, do you think, for some organizations?
Yeah, I think obviously the main thing is that the situation we're in at the moment, costs are changing weekly within the PPE space. From my own example, the cost of hand protection on gloves, for example, that's changing every week, every day, almost on some stuff. Logistical constraints as well, the cost of logistics. I think, a container, 40-foot container from China before the pandemic was probably $2,000. You're now talking nearly maybe $15,000 to pay for the logistical side of things. And the stock shortages as well, it's made life a lot more difficult. I think, you're not having as many of the progressive conversations you want to have with suppliers. A lot of them is about cost increases, and a lot of them is about when am I going to get stock. Whereas what we want to do is have more of those high level strategic conversations about how we grow together, and about, what can we put in place to really ramp up the growth over the next 3 or 4 years. We had a really good conversation, actually, one of the first ones we had in a QBR recently, where we were able to talk about 3 to 5 year plans. We haven't talked about that for a year because everything's just been so reactive.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge in that space. I think, like I say, the virtual side of things, it's making, you're having those conversations with people that you've never met face to face. It's, you can't read people as much, I guess, as well. You get a bit of an understanding of people when you meet them face to face, and when they're sort of telling you what's right and what's not, almost. It's you can build up more of that when you meet them face to face. And I think it's a much more competitive landscape as well. You've got particularly the rise of digital marketplaces, coming in on board, and suppliers that, are ever more acute about who they're targeting to deal with. So they want to see digital footprints and, customer reach and the ability to launch new products and things like that. All of which RS can do, which has, enabled us to grow really quickly in a real tough market. But, it is a competitive landscape, and suppliers are, really sort of cute about who they're talking to and who they're dealing with. And again, in a situation like this as well, a lot of the time stock is king, and it's a battle for stock a lot of times. That is a real challenge for us, managing that stock situation, and trying to be more proactive around it as well has been a challenge.
No, definitely. It's that and a real balance as well, because stock is king, but also cash is king. How much of your capital can you tie up in it and afford to tie up in it, versus how much availability do you need? So real challenges going on. Tom, thank you. Stay with us. We are going to now go into our panel discussion, and I'm delighted that we're joined today by Nicole Kurtz, who's Head of Supply Chain Services. I'm going to say this really slowly because it's a bit of a tongue twister. Lactalis McClelland Limited. Did I get that right?
McClelland
Limited. Beg your pardon. And Phil Bigland. Hi, Phil, who's Director at Dyson Business Services. Thanks for joining us on the panel today. Delighted to have you with us.
Thanks for having us.
Nicole, I just wanted to carry on that conversation with Tom and go to you and talk about why the importance, really, I guess, over the last few years of supplier relationships, and how that's kind of impacted you and your business.
Yes, I think the supplier relationships, any relationship, whether it's business or personal, is based on integrity, trust, understanding. I mean, Tom's spoken very eloquently about a lot of that already, but building on those elements to ensure a long-term stable relationship with key suppliers has been so important over the pandemic, and on all the supply chain resource crisis and challenges we've had with transport and pickers, Brexit, now the war in Ukraine, and as Tom mentioned, the rising costs. All of that has meant we've had to draw on those relationships more than ever, to make sure that we have a full understanding of what's happening in the industry, pooling our information, our resources, to work better together, to be able to get through these ups and downs that we've had in the last couple of years. I mean, my whole career, I don't think we've ever had so many things impacting the procurement and supply chain relationships in such a short space of time. So it really has tested those relationships, and I suppose that's why it's so key to have built up partnership relationships to be able to withstand all of those issues and those pressures, to be able to continue to work together and through them. I think basically to summarize that, the key is a long-term stable relationship that benefits both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, I guess you echo a lot of that.
Yes, yeah, a lot of that as well. And of course, we've reevaluated some of our supply chain where quite a lot was remote, and we were relying on playing on Tom's thing about containers, shipping stuff all around the world. And so we're reviewing how, or we've certainly made changes about where we do stuff. So bringing it closer to where our markets are, so where we sell stuff. So do we make product, do we source product closer to our customers, rather than relying on elongated supply chains, which drive some value, mostly in the pounds, but don't drive overall value. So if you don't have the product, you can't sell it. If you don't have the parts, you can't make stuff. So how do we get it closer? So I think that's perhaps I've seen other companies doing it as well, is reevaluating, how much do you put, in the Far East, for instance, and how much do you put, so maybe bringing it back to Europe or, into the Americas. And
as part of that plan, do you think that managing those relationships would be easier closer to home? Is that part of the strategy?
Part of that, often we're working with the same organizations. So we're just, basically leveraging their footprint for ourselves in many cases. Or we're sort of trying to help some of our suppliers extend where they maybe operate with us too. Some of the more sort of long-term relationships, especially some very specialist suppliers. In other cases, we are changing supply base and maybe helping some smaller suppliers grow more closer to home.
Yeah, I mean, that's a large issue, isn't it? I mean, lots of people talk about bringing things closer to home, but not always an option or possible. So actually developing new markets or helping suppliers to build more local capacity has had to be an option.
Yeah, I think seeing them as an extension of your business. So working with them to be able to ensure the continuity is just as important as mitigating the risk within your business. It's helping those suppliers to do the same and working with them to do that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just quickly as well, I think overall, in terms of importance of supplier relationships, a good supplier relationships leads to a good end user experience. There's no doubt about it, and that's the key element to it, is that the end user is the most important person in that journey. And for us as well, when we've got really good relationships, you get more access to things like new products, more marketing support for end users in local markets, better relationships at that local market level as well. And all of those things are really key, to driving a really good end user experience and making yourself best in class within that, and helping differentiate yourself in, as we said, what is a very competitive marketplace as well. And that all comes off the back of having really good supplier partner relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, if I could come to you, if we talk about KPIs and how you align your KPIs with your suppliers, and then the relationships that sit behind that.
Yes, actually, just following on from Tom's point a bit there, this will. So KPIs are one thing, and they sort of define some measures of performance, but it's SLAs that are above that that define the expectations. And I think the importance of setting expectations with a supplier for the supplier relationship and understanding our business, their business as well, and the priorities is absolutely critical right in the early stages, because the KPIs follow on from that, just measure performance. And following on from Tom's point, we talk about experience-led agreements rather than SLAs, so XLAs, which is sort of coming on the back of IT. I do quite a bit of stuff with IT teams within my area. And that's all about the customer experience. And that could be a stakeholder internally. It could be the final customer who's buying your products as well. So that could be, in terms of that, the courier in the next day delivery or whatever it might be, the experience you're getting from that. But in terms of the internal stakeholders as well, how you're setting up that supplier relationship to deliver internal customer experience as we go through, and whether that's having your laptop fixed on time or whatever it might be, that is an absolute critical part of what we're trying to do. You can have different types of KPIs on top of that as well, which sort of flow down, which are the time-centered ones, which are those ones which we're all used to. You'll do X by such and such a date. But how do we also look at relationship-centered ones as well? So the impact on our customer, which could be the first time fix, whether that's fixing a product out in a customer's house or whether it's fixing your laptop back in the office, whatever it might be. But all of that customer experience stuff is very much coming to the fore, especially in this sort of modern world of how you receive customer feedback, whether it's internal or external, and following up with customer satisfaction surveys, again in external, to sort of measure that supplier performance too. But again, it's that broad relationship you need. And I think Tom mentioned it earlier about having previously the customer, so the key account manager perhaps being your relationship, having a much broader relationship with, you know, the supply chain director within your supplier, to make sure there's, you know, what's their supply route, what's their contingency. You know, we talked about container prices, what other options are available, what can we do over land, could we move to a different port, how does that link with what we do? And those conversations are getting much deeper now, because you have to plan in such a different way than we did previously. Previously, there were plenty of container shipping left to right, right to left.
Yeah.
At the moment, they're not. And so we need to work really smartly together to get the answers we need.
Tom, can I follow on that one and talk to you a little bit about KPIs? And actually, we had a question through from an attendee as well about kind of what are some of the KPIs you use with suppliers.
Yeah, no worries. I think it's really important to try and align where you can. Obviously, there is going to be different sort of the things that everyone's looking at within that. I guess, you know, there's a million and one things you can be doing as well, and aligning the KPIs allows you to have a bit more focus on what's really important. You know, one of the things that we do, I think quite well, is that we try and align on, as Phil said, around delivery performance, for example, aligning that to the supplier. So maybe tying it to a rebate agreement or something as well that says, you know, if they don't hit this there'll be a payment due. It gives them that focus on trying to improve delivery performance, which we then see has a big effect on the end user in terms of their experience, you know, stock availability being higher and things like that. So I think from my own point of view, you know, those sort of areas are where we try and focus it, trying to tie it into that. You obviously then there's like sales growth as well, trying to tie KPIs into that sort of stuff. We're trying to, you know, with some of our more, I guess, more developed suppliers, trying to tie more into sort of digital things as well, looking at conversion rates and, you know, and things like basket additions and all this sort of stuff, like looking at where we can try and tie our KPIs together to say, you know what, let's try and hit that conversion rate for next year. If we move that by 1%, that will actually unlock this much revenue. So, you know, we are trying to look at where we can make real differences by trying to align on KPIs. But I think it's trying to, from my own point of view, it's trying to get to the heart of what will actually make a big difference. Because there's so many things you can look at together. It's just important to zone in on what really makes a difference. And I think from my own personal experience as well, I think being able to align KPIs means you actually get to the real issues, rather than just, you know, rather than talking around subjects. You actually have a bit more focus on getting to where you need to be. And as sort of Phil was touching on there, when you've got those alignment on KPIs, it unlocks those other relationships as well. You know, if you've got an alignment on trying to hit a certain delivery performance, suddenly you've got their supply chain director interested in what needs to happen, and you can build a relationship there. So there's all that ties into it as well.
Thanks, Tom. I could see, Nicole, that you agreeing and nodding away with a lot of that.
Definitely. I think, you know, there's that, like Tom says, you know, having that alignment at the top level, so important. But something that we've done is ensured the aligned goals and KPIs across the teams. So, you know, for example, my stock manager in my team has the same KPI as the GM in the warehouse on stock loss tolerance within our business. So, you know, his teams and our team are working very closely to ensure that, you know, they meet that objectives, that KPI. So, you know, there's an industry standard on, of course, there's going to be some damage, you know, just in the general supply chain, but they're looking deeper into, you know, if there's any spikes in that KPI. Well, has there been a packaging change? Has something changed in a shift? What, you know, they're really going into the root cause, and both are aligned to make sure that works, rather than just going, oh, well, you know, the supplier will have to pay for it if, you know, it goes above the KPI. So they're working really closely together, and doing that across the different KPIs has made such a difference.
Excellent, thanks for that. Tom, you mentioned, and we said we would come back to it, and we are. We talked about trust and the role that trust plays in building strong partnerships. Can you share any examples, where it's been a key success factor in managing supply relationships?
Yeah, definitely. I think, for us as a group, trust is, fundamental to any partnership anyway. I mean, it's fundamental to any relationship, whether it's business or in life as well, really. But, some of the things that we sort of live by within the electro components world is sort of that, accountability, integrity and that sort of stuff. And, that doesn't come without trust. I guess for me, I've seen real life examples of it through COVID, trying to source product from all over the place to try and fulfill massive customer demand. You've got to be trusting that not only are you buying a product that actually works, that is actually a face mask that's qualified to a certain standard. We saw hundreds of fake stuff come onto the market, fake certificates, fake products. So trying to build trusting relationships with suppliers like through that element is really difficult. There's within our own normal supply base as well. You've got to trust what they're saying around lead times and stock situations and cost price influences and things that are driving the cost price up and all this sort of stuff as well. It is, it has been a real testing time for trust, I think, in terms of your supplier relationships over the past couple of years. And like I was saying, that the virtual world has made that even more difficult. A lot of the time when you're trying to buy products to fulfill demand from different sources, often they can sort of almost hide behind emails, or that you don't have to have that face-to-face conversation. So it's a lot easier for you to fall into traps around buying stock which isn't actually registered or isn't compliant or whatever. So over the past couple of years, building that trusting element has been really tough. But I think what we found is that most of our supply partners, I think, have been really good through the COVID situation. They've been really trusting in what they've said. They've all done the right things, I think, by prioritising frontline medical and, telling us what stock we do have available and there's all this sort of stuff. But I think, there's no doubt that over the past couple of years, you've definitely seen who are the most trusting supply partners to work with compared to who wouldn't be moving forward. But again, it's been pretty difficult to establish some of those trusting relationships with the virtual world. There's account managers I've worked with for about a year now. I've not met them face to face yet because of one situation or another. And you think you have quite a good relationship, but until you meet them face to face, you don't really get that real read on what their personality is or what their traits are and things like that. So yeah, it always plays a fundamental element. It's key to any sort of partnership. You can't have a partnership without trust. Otherwise you're just working on that sort of vendor buyer thing almost. But there's no doubt over the past 2 years it's been tough to establish who are the right partners to deal with and who aren't.
Phil, similar story for you, and are you having to have more like open, transparent conversations and be more open with information as well to build that trust?
I think it's almost the supplier feeling that they can tell the truth to you sometimes, because sometimes they like to hide things or don't want to because they're going to fail their KPIs or whatever it might be. But if you don't know and you don't have that honest, open relationship, then and they feel they're not going to get punished if they do tell you the truth, that it makes life a lot easier and you can get to the point quicker and you can get the answer quicker because you can help each other. I remember a situation we had when the pandemic was hitting India. We had a big supplier over there who were doing a lot of our accounts payable, and we had an open relationship there that they were able to come to us and say, we've got a massive problem. In fact, we might not be able to process your payments. But we were able to do something really quickly, which was to train up people who hadn't done accounts payable before, but we trained up a load of our people in UK to process payments. So we could do something together. And it wasn't about punishing them because they were going to fail their SLAs or KPIs or whatever. It was about getting the job done together. Yeah. And luckily, we didn't need to do it, but we were there on standby, ready to go. And it was just, if they hadn't come to us at that time and felt they could, we'd never been ready.
No, and I guess it's that sense of we're all in this together. If you go down, we potentially go down.
Yeah.
So having that more those more connected conversations. Nicole, is that something that you've seen as well in your business?
Definitely. We had the joy, or not so much joy, of having to move warehouse and transport provider in the middle of the pandemic. And when we had resource issues and supply chain. So we very much knew that we had to move to a supplier that we could trust, and that we could build those relationships with. From past events, we had started to build on those relationships, and we had a 6-week window where normally you would plan something like that for months to execute and plan a move, and based on what Tom and Phil have both said, is that trust is so important. But to build that, it's the integrity. So if you say you're going to do something, it's doing it. It's working together. It's spending time in workshops, looking at all the risks and how we're going to do it, and then acting as we said we would act on it. And we had a really successful move, and all through those 6 weeks of preparation, you could see the trust and the integrity and the relationships building. Even though it was virtual, it's not as easy doing it virtual, but we did. And we've taken every opportunity we could since then, where there is an opportunity to go and have a meeting on site at the warehouse, to do that and take the time, over lunch, instead of working through lunch, actually just sit down and have a conversation, just to build the personal side of it, because that's still important, but it's just there's not as many opportunities nowadays to do that side of it. But it's really, we could not have done that without that trust that we've continued to build over the years.
No, I know what you mean, because I mean, even from where we've had loads of new starters from an employee perspective, never mind, and it's similar for onboarding suppliers who you've never met, and when you generally have meetings where all the face-to-face contact you have on screen is all around getting the business done, and there aren't those opportunities to just sit and chew the fat and have a conversation and build those relationships. So making that time is really important. And on that point about time, Nicole, if we could segue into the next question, which is around all these fostering these partnerships is great, and we're putting out fires everywhere, so you're probably having to have much deeper partnerships with more suppliers, but you've only got so much time and resource. So how have you gone around prioritizing your resource to help build a bit more of a resilient supply chain, given how much time and effort it takes? And I guess if I can link into some of the questions that are coming through on this, then how do you take that further down? We're just talking perhaps partnerships at tier 1 here, but how do you then look at resource to perhaps even go beyond that in terms of building more resilience?
Yeah, so I think it definitely has to be at all levels of the business, that partnership mentality. That's such a key word, that partnership. They're a business partner that the whole team needs to see them as a long-term strategic partner, and so if you have that, and that trust is built, and you continue on that, you're able to pool your team resources. So we work really closely with our 3PL, and our teams work closely. We share industry knowledge and understanding of the upcoming risks, to be able to get to the point quicker, get to options and solutions quicker. I mean, at the moment, with the rising costs of absolutely everything, which I'm sure everyone has been set objectives and saving, to find savings and to bring those costs down. But it's even more important now than ever to make sure that whilst you are doing that, you're working with your supplier to make sure that their business viability is ongoing. And if you are working together on that and not spending the time and resource in, trying to outdo each other, then you're able to spend that time and that resource mutually aligning on the best way forward to mitigate risks, to identify risks and put action plans in place on that. If I think of an example we had last year with, we had all the driver shortages, we had shortages in picking staff, and we, from our business point of view, we were seeing spikes in demand within each lockdown that we went to. It would be a huge rise in demand, and chasing to try and keep up with that as well, but then not having enough staff to pick it and distribute it. Because we understood each other's businesses, we were able to work with our supplier to go to our customers to explain the need to increase minimum order quantities, which could increase our picking efficiency, which could increase our truck full and reduce the number of trucks that we were having to send each day, and therefore manage the overall situation to get as much stock to customers as possible. So it really is about working together rather than against each other, so that you can pool those resources and work in a smarter way.
Absolutely, yeah. Tom, if I could come to you as well to, how you're building in more resilience through these partnerships.
Yeah, I think so. What Nicole touched on was, summed it up really well. I think the other thing on that is, as far as that, it's about investing in the right areas, and using the data from your own sort of data sources that you have within your business, but also from the supplier in terms of what they're seeing in the wider market, to understand, okay, are we investing in the areas that are really going to turn the dial here? So, big one would be digital, making sure that you and the supply partner are working together to invest in the digital offer that we've got. Is the content right? Is all that sort of stuff in place that's going to make it easy for the customer? It's about working with them to have a more proactive attitude towards stocking situations, building in more resilience around that, looking at demand portfolios and what's really going to make sure that if something like this happens again, we're not going to be caught out in terms of stock situation, but also investing in the right products, the right product ranges, the right markets. All those elements come together, I think, in terms of trying to build in more resilience to the supply chain. I think as well, that also, I saw one of the questions about prioritizing within that, and I think that enables you to prioritize almost as well. Because if you can demonstrate to your supply partners, these are the areas that are really going to make a big difference for us, having a great digital offer, having a real robust product offering behind that, having a good stock situation within that digital offer, and having it enabled across the globe is going to make sure that your products are as accessible to as many customers as possible. And that's really going to turn the dial. Sometimes, like anything, some supply partners might get a bit hung up on the little things that aren't really going to make a difference to you. They might come to you and say, what, we need to change the imaging on all 500 of these products because the logo is slightly wrong or something. That's not going to make a massive difference. What I want to know is, how can we expand that product offering? How can we get it to more customers than we're getting it to now? So I think having that understanding of making sure you're investing in the areas that really turn the dial is really important. And using data, I think, is the best way to do that. Making sure you're making data-led decisions.
Yeah, on that, Phil, can I kind of expand on that and talk about perhaps what digital tools and data we really should be looking at as procurement teams, and utilizing digital technology perhaps more to help spread the resources that we have, to have more visibility and build more relationships.
Yeah, there are a lot of tools on the market, and they seem to be more and more appearing every day. Yeah. Whether they're any good is a different question. I think for some parts of this, there's some basic requirements that you need, and some of that is access to sufficient and organized data. If we haven't got that, you haven't got a starting base. the second thing is, do you have the right technologies for yourself, and do you have them existing in your business, or do you need to go and buy something or make something? And one of the bits that I've been investing in quite a lot recently is skilled analytics. So it's all right having all this stuff. You need people who are skilled at analysing it to bring out insight. And I think once you've got that, couple in that support from the top, obviously, because obviously there might be some investment to do. But in day-to-day procurement, and I'll lump in some of this stuff that I do as well. You can streamline your process. You can make them digital. Catalogs. This is totally unscripted, Tom, but we have a really great catalog with RS components for our engineers, so they can order. We used to have it was all over P cards and everything. It was all over the place, but we put a streamlined way of working in with that, and really effective. That's a sort of really basic level through Ariba, and we use Ariba to do all of our stuff. So it's really basic. On the procure to pay side of things, we've got vendor invoice management. We've got some latest software on that, which we're using AI on. Put a big project in place last year around that to really sort of automate the straight throughput of that, to release people to do other stuff, to make I'll come back to that customer experience, giving your customers apps, which, Reba, but other tools are available. You have an app, people can buy off the app, they can process stuff through the app, etc. It really just makes life a bit easier. It's what you do in your normal, if you're not in work and you're buying something from Ryanair or EasyJet, you can do it on an app. You can, it's very simple. So why don't we use these tools at work? They become very, these sort of digital natives, as they call them. Everyone's used to using them. I think as you go up the value chain in procurement projects and they become much more complex, it becomes a little more difficult. And that's where data really comes in and data visualization as well, to really explain complex data to your stakeholders, to give them insight. We use a tool called Looker, which is a Google tool. We're in the Google Cloud, so all our data's up there. So we can visualize it and bring insight to our stakeholders and get them thinking differently. Sometimes you can show them stuff and it's that aha moment, I could call it. Right, okay, I understand what you're trying to tell me now.
Yeah.
You can drive them down a different route of thinking differently, rather than, but we've always done it this way. Yeah, but the world's changed, and here's some insight into what you're doing. For instance, these are the lanes we're currently using on logistics. Maybe we could think about doing it differently. And that really can change the way people think. I think coming to the supplier bit, so how do you use that with suppliers on a day-to-day basis, rather than sort of a transactional piece or some internal piece, is how can you exchange data with them that allows you to make decisions quickly? And I come back to that container problem we've all struggled with, because we all need containers at some point in our life. How do we get our 3PLs to give us the data of where the containers are, where the blockages are, what routes are good, what routes are bad? We all got stuff by when the ship in the Suez Canal. Yeah, I mean, we had all sorts of stock stuffed in there that was going to be feeding into Europe. So what did we need to do to get it off? But it allows that quick decision making when you've got the insight. So sharing data from the 3PL, they've got plenty of data on where the containers are, into our systems, analyze it. Right, what's it telling us? And then how do we work together to say, actually, let's start transshipping somewhere else and going a different route into a different port that isn't as blocked, and we'll ship it. We'll use haulage, from, let's say, Mexico up, as an example, into the Americas, which we did because of blockages in ports. So how do we shift the problem somewhere else and utilize that? But that's all to do with having the right organized data and the tools and the analytics over the top of it. Without that, you've just got a nice tool that's shiny in a box but doesn't really do anything.
Yes, quite, and we've definitely seen that as a common theme through technology. That two big streams really: efficiencies, so you can redirect all your resources to where you need them most, and managing these relationships, and then insights, like you say, getting the data, the real-time information. Nicole, is that something that you're investing in your business too?
Yes, we have the benefits of a larger group and the resources and technology that they bring along with that. But I think Phil summed it up really well. Having the right information in the tool and accessible in a quick and easy way to analyze it quickly is really important. It enables those better decisions with the stakeholders, you know, and I love that aha moment. Phil talks about that's exactly it, you know, being able to show the rest of the business what you're trying to do and guide them in the direction of the decisions that you need made to help with your relationships with your procurement and supply. I think we also need to be aware of new information that is being required in the industry, although it's not very new, but it's becoming more of a focus, is, you know, carbon emissions, carbon footprint, things like that, where you know, businesses may traditionally not have had that digitalized or in a system or easily monitored in the past. And I think we need to be aware of those trends to keep up to date with what we are recording and putting through different systems to analyze. Because you know, as Tom and Phil have said, there's loads of different options out there, but you know, having a tool that allows you to quickly pull out exceptions and the key information is really important.
Tom, yeah, you make a really good point there, Nicole, actually, because we weren't just talking about risk, I guess, when we're using these tools, and having that visibility and more transparency, so you can address sustainability goals or whatever it is that you're doing. Tom, have you invested more in skill sets in RS to kind of tackle this data and get a handle on it more? Seen all sorts of roles recently, digital gurus and whatever, but I think that data, like you say, is king. Having clean data in an ordered format and being able to respond and get the right data at the right time is critical.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're I mean, as electro components, I mean, we're probably one of the biggest spenders with Google, because our website gets so much interaction. We get so much data from it. You're right. You do have to invest in the people who can really get down into, okay, what's that actually telling me? I think, you know, one of the things that we've done tied to sort of sustainability is using that data to say what is actually important to the customer around sustainability. You know, is it the carbon footprint piece? Is it less water, or is it, you know, it's made from recycled materials? Because sustainability is such a large topic. You know, it could mean one or 100 things. So I think the way the team, you know, that has expanded massively within RS, definitely, particularly, you know, when you go, say we go down to the London office, you'll see a lot of the digital guys there, sort of straight out of university, who have got that sort of pedigree, and you know, some of the data they're shifting through and what they can tell you is really great to see. You know, you can track customer journeys through websites. You can look at, you know, where you've got lapsed customers, where you've got where customers fell off that journey, why they fell off that. I think that's the important thing for me, is that using that data to show, okay, what is really important for the end user? What are they looking for? What are the pinch points for them? And then using that data to then inform your decision making. You know, we can use that to form, we use it, for example, to say, you know what, actually, these new range of products, the customers were searching for those a lot. You know, we need to enhance that range. We need to develop that range. And again, it comes back to that element of trying to prioritize. It almost enables you to look at where the real sort of dial turners are. But definitely, you've got to have the right people to be able to interpret that data and make sense of it, because there is so much of it there. And, you know, from my own point of view, I just do a lot of, I mean, from my own stuff, I just do a lot of almost trial and error with it, you know, just playing about with data to understand, okay, what's that actually telling me? But again, that all helps develop that supplier relationship as well. I found that when you can share stuff with suppliers around digital metrics, for example, you get a lot more buy-in from them in terms of, God, we've never seen this before. It almost comes back to Phil's thing of the aha moment. Suppliers are like, we've never seen that before. You know, we can invest, you know, they suddenly now know where to go. And again, it helps you develop that relationship. You get the buy-in, you get more support with it and that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, I think having the right people to interpret it is important, but then it's almost how you use it off the back of that is even more important yourself.
No, definitely. And on that point, we did have a question through from one of the attendees as well on kind of how you share what's going on in the wider environment in your supply chain, and then how you feed that back into your organization. I mean, I guess all this data, I don't know if anyone's producing regular reports for the board members, or, are you getting asked that data, or are you proactively sending it out? I don't know if anybody wants to pick up that on how they're communicating these changes, etc., to the business.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of that, Emma, to be honest. The different teams that we've got will have those different reports that are important to their area. You'll have the inventory teams producing daily reports on the stocking position and delivery performance and all the data that comes with that. You'll have the digital teams talking about the web metrics and, what we're seeing with conversion rates and product views and everything that's involved in digital. And, from the product guys like myself and the sort of category management teams, you'll have metrics around obviously the generic stuff with sales and growth and all that element, but also like how many customers we've got, what products are they looking for, what products are they searching for, what was important to the customer. So we get access to that, every day. But you also have the autonomy to have your own access to all the feeds for that and the source material for that. So if you want to, you can produce your own stuff, which is what I do a lot as well, because I think sometimes with the data as well, it also helps if you're producing it yourself, because you know exactly what you're talking about. There's nothing worse than putting some data up and a supplier interrogates it and you don't have a clue what to come back with. So I think making sure that, you can pull that data or interpret that data yourself is really important, as well as communicating it to the wider business. But yeah, if there's anything that looks like it's going to cause us issues or is a big negative for the business, you'll get more communication on that from the board and the sort of senior level teams that we've got around the globe.
I think on our perspective, Emma, we're a manufacturer, so whilst we use some third parties, we manufacture a load of stuff ourselves, and so it's a standing board point. Supply chain stuff is just a standing point, and we go through because it's our bread and butter.
Yeah.
And there's various questions about tier 1, 2, and 3 have been appearing, and we work really closely with those suppliers right down to the chip manufacturers, because we have to. We develop a quality product and people pay quite a lot of money for it, so we need to make sure it's of the right quality, so we don't leave it to others to make stuff. And it's a bit of philosophy of how we operate, and we make all the critical components that make a difference between ours and the competition we make in-house, which is our competitive advantage over many. So it is literally a day-to-day, and over the whole crisis of COVID and all this other stuff that's come out, logistics, chips, batteries, and all sorts of problems. We people used to call it a war room, but we've had that sort of day-to-day management of supply.
Yeah.
And then obviously the output of that supply is then supply to markets, so who we're going to feed the product into customers. So what's selling where? What's selling in India today is not selling in America because it's just different climates. Different times of the year, etc. So how do we move product around the world as well?
We had another question through, and Nicole, I don't know if you want to pick this one up. How do you support SME suppliers? And I guess in your sector you must have quite a lot of small farmers or small businesses that you work with. How do you invest that much time and that partnership with smaller suppliers?
I think it's important to have, it needs to be clear within your business on who is dealing with which suppliers and who is building those relationships. It all links to a lot of what we've said already. Sharing information, working in a partnership mentality. But obviously, you do need to manage your time according to how important those suppliers are to the continuity of your business, and look at that risk factor as well. But I think we've consolidated both our warehousing and transport with the same supplier within the UK, so that we can really build a stronger, bigger partnership there. But obviously we've got factors feeding into that, because supply chain is, it's farmers, factory, inbound, where it just is, it's such a long chain of events. There's multiple elements along it, but having the right information and KPIs from all of those suppliers helps you delve when you need to give support, more support to a smaller supplier than not, and when to dig into issues or costs or anything a bit more than you normally would. And so we've got the added element of European and UK that I'm sure a lot of businesses do, and we've got the broader business as well as external suppliers. So it's making sure you've got the teams looking at the right KPIs and the right elements with those suppliers, but knowing when perhaps they need, from that, knowing when they perhaps need a little bit extra guidance or help or input from yourselves.
Great stuff, thanks. Tom, we have another question through. Like, how do you manage that disconnect sometimes? Like, where you see that supplier is strategic to you, but they perhaps don't see themselves as being strategic.
Yeah, I think that's where it becomes really important to have a really good understanding of the strategy of your business, and being able to sell that strategy almost, and sell the vision of what you're trying to achieve. I think, from an RS point of view, when we can go and talk to supply partners about, the digital platform, we've got the customer reach, we've got, the support that we've got on the ground in terms of salespeople in all the different markets, the innovative stuff we can offer, the ability to launch new products quickly and effectively. You've got to be able to sell what makes your business different to others, and what differentiators you're bringing into the market. From an RS point of view, if we simply said we've got a great digital footprint, I'm sure a supplier would just say, we'll serve Amazon. They've got the best one. And then it's important for us to say, well, actually, do they bring all the value-added services to it? Are they getting do Amazon customers get the support that we give them? Do they have salespeople talking to them and all this? So, it's really important that you can demonstrate what makes your business different. And I think having a really good understanding of the strategy and what you're trying to achieve and where you're going enables you to sell that almost, and bring that. You can then almost try and encourage the supplier to come along on that journey with you, which is what we've done. And I'd also say as well, it's brilliant if you can do that yourself, but don't be afraid to lean on, the senior level people within your business. Bring in a COO or a CEO to your meeting. I've done that a few times with supply partners. These guys are talking to investors and people like that constantly. Yeah. So if anyone can sell a vision and what we want to achieve, they can do it brilliantly. And I think, being able to bring those guys into certain meetings and help support that has been a real helpful one for me, definitely. But I think, overall, really sell what makes you different. What are you bringing to the marketplace that's going to make a real difference for the end user, essentially.
Great, thanks, Tom. Great advice. We're rapidly running out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. So I'm going to go to all of our panelists to just give their one last top tip, piece of advice that they'd give to the audience before we draw to a close. So your top tip on improving working relationships with suppliers to drive value. Phil, you go first.
Oh, that's dangerous. I would say get really close to them, know them personally, get into the detail, understand each other's priorities.
Excellent. Nicole?
Very good summary from Paul. But I would say in terms of improving working relationships, take the word working out of that relationship building. Get to know them personally. Integrity is key, and having those open relationships.
Fabulous. And Tom, last one from you.
I'd say build the relationships outside of just the normal account manager. Really get into the heart of their business and build relationships across the board. And also do what you say and say what you do. Really key.
Sound advice, sound advice. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we didn't get around to all your questions. We had loads of questions today and time just went so quickly. Thank you to Nicole, Tom and Phil. That was excellent. Some real great insights and advice. Hopefully you found all that very useful. Don't forget, we've recorded this session. And we'll send you the link to that next week, along with the other 2 sessions that you may have missed already. But thank you so much to RS once again. And we've shared some of their resources in the chat as well. So there's reports to go and have a look at. Nicole, Phil, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great debate and I look forward to the next one. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.